Washington, D.C. I'm Tom Moyes. I will be your host for today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Financing Coffee Growers, Lessons from a Banking Partnership in Honduras. We are coming to you from the Agricultural Finance Support Facility, or AgriFin program, here at the World Bank. AgriFin aims to catalyze learning about successful agricultural finance models through the sharing of practical information and the fostering of peer-to-peer exchange. Our webinar series is one way that we accomplish that goal. Through the webinar series, we engage primarily commercial bankers to share their insights and experiences with you, the broader audience of agricultural finance professionals, about specific products and processes that have worked well in their own respective markets. So today, I think we are very privileged to have two gentlemen with us, one of whom will give a formal presentation about a very interesting model of cooperation between financial institutions, which we haven't seen very many examples of. So first, we're going to hear from Antonio Coelho. Antonio is the Regional Vice President of Business Development for Banco Continental. Banco Continental is a commercial bank in Honduras, and they have recently partnered with another financial institution, as I was mentioning, called Bancafe, specifically for financing coffee growers. So in the webinar this morning, Antonio is going to discuss how that partnership helps the bank to expand its credit and lending and manage the risks that are associated with financing coffee producers. But before I turn the microphone over to Antonio, I just want to review briefly how we're going to proceed with the webinar. So we will start with the formal presentation. I think you can all see that on your screen. Antonio will walk us through this presentation. Should take about 20 to 25 minutes. And then we will hear from Antonio's colleague, Juan Carlos Barahona Lara. He is the regional manager of Bancafe, and he will talk a bit, I think, about the benefits, the direct benefits that his financial institution gains from that partnership. And then after we've heard from our webinar presenters, we are going to listen to questions and review questions that have come in from our wider audience from around the world. And then we will be collecting those questions, by the way, during the course of the webinar, and then at the conclusion of the presentations, we'll try to run through those in a systematic way. We'll be gathering them up here and then directing those questions to Antonio and Juan Carlos. So Antonio and Juan Carlos, you don't need to worry about tracking the questions. We'll collect them and then we'll go through them at the end. But I would like to urge everyone, if you have a question that comes up in your own mind through the course of the presentations, you can simply send it to us. You can use the chat box on the far lower right-hand corner of your screen. You'll notice a rectangular box. That's the chat box. Inexplicably, there's a Q&A tab that actually doesn't work, and we will not be using that. You should be in the chat section on the right-hand screen, and then you can put your question into that rectangular box at the bottom. That will come into us. We'll gather it together and direct it to our presenters. Okay, very good. So with that as our introduction, Antonio, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. The main focus of this short presentation is to explain how coffee rust affected Honduras in the past couple of years, and a solution that we found between the Coffee Growers Association and two commercial banks here in Honduras. And I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about our bank, which is Banco Continental, so you can have an idea of the size of the bank and an idea of what we are oriented at. Banco Continental was founded in March 20, 1974, and the bank's main objective from its very beginning was to serve both the commercial sector of Honduras as well as the agro-industrial sector of the country. We are very oriented to the industrial and the agro-industrial sector of the country. And Banco Continental, to give you an idea, has about 98 sites between ventanillas, which are located in the customers' facilities, as well as other branches selected throughout the country. And our total assets are approximately about $530 million, and the placing us in one of the most as one of the most important financial institutions of the country. You can see by the size that the banks here locally aren't as big as you might be able to see in other countries. One of the biggest competitive advantages we have here is that we form part of a very strong group of businesses here in Honduras, which are in communications, the agribusiness, banks, insurance, housing, and construction. So it gives us the advantage that we have a very clear idea of how each segment is doing here in the country. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how our loan portfolio is comprised. And as you can see, we don't have any major concentrations in any of it. Our major concentration, which is about 30%, is in housing. And here in housing, it's both long-term as well as development. So you can see that the funds are fairly distributed. Our second segment being agriculture. Then we have industry about 13%, and within that industrial, a lot of it is agro-industrial. So the agri part is very important to us here. Here's an idea of how our agricultural loan portfolio is comprised. And you can see that 28.46% of our loan portfolio in the ag sector is in coffee. In the big part where you can see that 66%, there is also a part that's in coffee. However, this part is the ones that aren't directly specifically for coffee. It can be a farmer that has a little bit of coffee and a little bit of something else, and so that's why it's the biggest part. To give you an idea, by March 2014, our loan portfolio in the ag sector was about approximately $42 million. Well, and to talk a little bit about the background and what got us started with this initiative, within Central America, Honduras was the most affected country by coffee rust. Coffee represents approximately 8.5% of the country's total gross domestic product. So you can see that if something was affecting the coffee sector, it was something that would affect the country's income directly. To give you an idea, it is thought that there were more than 100,000 farmers affected nationwide, and that more than 175 acres were damaged. Within these 175 acres that were damaged, 35,000 acres were lost completely, and the other part, the other 140 were damaged severely. This represented between direct and indirect jobs, it was 1.5 million jobs that were at risk. Coffee rust is a disease caused by the fungus Emilia vastatrix, and it infects the coffee plant leaves. The fungus infection also causes the fruit to fall prematurely. It is susceptible to insect attacks, poor fertilization, and deficient growing conditions, finally affecting the overall production of the plant. This is to give you an idea what the disease is. And what the major needs were once coffee rust started affecting the country. And the major needs were, one, where the coffee plantations were lost for good. We had capital for farm renovations, and then those that were affected needed capital for farm rehabilitation. Within our the program that we came up with, and the product that we came up with to tend these affected farmers, there were three key players. One was Bancafe, and the other one was Continental, and then the other one was the Instituto Hondureño del Café, which is ICAFE, and it's a private institution, a nonprofit organization that regulates coffee growing nationwide and oversees the needs of the industry, seeking fast and adequate solutions for the industry. And what it is that ICAFE started seeing that the coffee farmers didn't have where to recur for their financial needs. And so they had the initiative of looking for the 2 or 3 banks that they knew that were into the ag sector. We are 13 commercial banks in Honduras. However, not many of the commercial banks tend the ag sector. It's a little bit more complicated, and you need long-term funds, and those aren't that available here in the country. And so ICAFE went directly to those few banks that normally tend the ag sector. And so, as I was saying, there were 3 major participants, and we had a few challenges on the way. The first one was the availability of funds. It is hard to get funds, long-term funds here locally. Then the other one is that farmers didn't have any collateral. All their collateral was already, in many cases, their collateral was already committed to a financial institution. When they need money for fertilization and fertilizers and other things, they had their collateral, which is in most of the cases their farm, was already committed to a bank. And so these farmers didn't have any collateral available. And well, the last one was that we had very high operating costs. And the idea of the product was to direct it to those people that had a hard time getting loans in banks. And so the loan amounts were very small, and they needed multiple disbursements because all the money wasn't going into the farm at once. So the operating costs were also very high. And these farmers, they aren't in the cities. They are many times within the mountains of Honduras. And so it was very, one of the things that we had to do is we had to make it as easy as possible for the farmers as well. So we designed the Credit Cafe, which was a product designed and directed directly to those affiliated to ICAFE. And more than 90% of Honduras coffee growers are affiliated to ICAFE. And it is designed to finance those farmers specifically affected by coffee rust in this case, and for both rehabilitation and renovation purposes. Here's a little bit about the product detail and the conditions that we came up between both banks. And between both banks, we accorded that we would finance up to $45 million. And the loan amounts were to be between $750 to a maximum of $7,500. And why we did this is because we wanted to help the most farmers possible. As there are many small farmers here in Honduras, we also have medium-sized farmers and large farmers, and those normally don't have much of a problem getting funds. They have more collateral to give. They already have a relationship with banks. And so we designed this product to help those that normally could not get funds available and don't get tended in their banks because most of them weren't bankarized already. And so the term would be up to 84 months in those cases where a complete renovation was necessary. And the financing would be in U.S. dollars, and this was be able to finance it, to lower the financing cost. Interest rates are a lot higher in the local currency, and so in dollars we would be able, sorry, to give a lower interest rate. And the other thing is that for when it was for renovations, complete renovations, we would be working with complete multiple disbursements, and we would give a grace period for up to 36 months. This would be only in the cases of renovation. And this is probably one of the most important things, and it was that the payment is secured with the ICAFE's withholdings. For every quintal of coffee that is produced by a farmer, ICAFE withholds $9, and from those $9 comes the repayment of the loan. And this is a little bit of how the Credit Café process works, and it seems a little bit more complicated in paper, so I'm going to explain it, but the process is really quite simple, and what we did is that ICAFE gave us a complete listing of all their their associates that were affected by coffee rust. We pre-reviewed this listing, and from this listing, just by looking at their credit history, we would pre-approve their loans. And for those farmers that qualified from the listing that ICAFE gave us, an ICAFE technician would prepare a file and send it to a bank. This file isn't something very complicated. It's just one sheet of paper where they would give us an idea of what their production rates were for the last couple of years. And so from that, an approval certification was elaborated. It was a multiple approval where all those that qualified were approved. And from that, we notified ICAFE of those that approved from the listing that they gave us. And so the clients would either go directly to any of both banks, in some branches, and the success of doing this with Bancafe is that some places where Bancafe doesn't have an office, we would have an office, and some places where we didn't have an office, Bancafe would have an office. And so practically people would be able to go to either ICAFE, where they go constantly because they have a direct relation with, or to any of both banks that have many branches nationwide, and so that made it a lot easier for the client. Once that ICAFE confirmed, or the client directly confirmed that the client was interested in the loan, we would sign up the legal documents, and the bank executive locally in each of the, either in the small towns where we have branches or the closest one nearby, and the client would go and sign, and then we would proceed to pay out the loan depending on their disbursement plan. When it was for rehabilitation, it was one disbursement, and when it's renovation, it's multiple disbursements. And once the credit was approved, there was a maximum time of disbursement, and this was something that we came up with, ICAFE and Bancafe, something that we would be able to tend. And it was a maximum of 30 days for us to disburse the loan. It almost never took this long, and we would be able to tend these disbursements in a maximum time of a week, maybe. And in the cases where partial disbursements were necessary, ICAFE's technician, they normally and regularly give technical aid to these clients, and so they were the ones responsible for submitting the on-site report, because they would visit the farms regularly anyway. And ICAFE also had a few commitments by their side, and they were the ones responsible and in charge of supervising that the funds reached their destination. Their technical assistant team supervised farmers directly and visited the farms. in the cases that farmers, those farmers finance, were due to regular supervisions and visits from the ICAFE's technicians. And there was one final thing, which was that the ICAFE, in those cases where banks started having problems with the recovery, since the loans were very small, it would be very expensive for the banks to recover these funds. And since ICAFE has a direct relation with all these clients, they would also aid in the cases needed when a recovery was necessary. And so this is how the product works, and the success of the product definitely was because we came up with a product between both Bancafe, ICAFE, and Banco Continental, and this made us give the customers a product that was really able to help them with something that they wouldn't, funds that they wouldn't have been able to get if it weren't because we designed the product directly at them. And this is a little bit about the numbers and how we are to the date. Banco Continental, we have been able to disburse, to approve, 2,238 loans up to the date, which is comprised in $6.5 million. As you can see, most loans are very small, and these people normally didn't have they didn't have the opportunity to get funds in a bank. And then Bancafe, with 2,877 loans, comprised by approximately $11 million that have been disbursed. With this, I conclude the major factors of the product that we came up with, and I'd be waiting for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Antonio. Very interesting. I think now we have Juan Carlos with us. I'm just going to ask Juan Carlos Barahona Lara. He's regional manager at Bancafe. Juan Carlos, can you add something to our understanding of this partnership that you have with Banco Continental?
Okay. Thank you. Good morning to all. As Antonio has already spoken and tell everybody about the program, Bancafe and Banco Continental have had a long-term relationship with ICAFE. We have been managing the trust funds from ICAFE where per 100 pounds of coffee produced by one of the producers, there's a withholding of $9. So we have been managing this withholding for about the last 10 years. And when the rust came, we agreed to create this loan program to get reach to all the small producers that don't have any collateral. The benefits of this is that we don't ask the client for a collateral, so they can have access to the finance, and we have the repayment from the withholding that, in this case, Banco Continental Trust is managing, and Banco Continental is having as collateral the withholding that Bancafe has managing the trust. There are two trusts managing the same withholding for every producers. So this is one of the greatest benefits for our producers. They're getting access to the finance to renovate their production, and during the harvest season, actually we are right now in the harvest season, we're confirming with the ICAFE how much quintales about 100 pounds, have each producer registered to the cafe they have to produce. So with the withholding right now, we're paying this. During October of this month, we are repaying the first installment of the loan we have gave to the producers. So this is one of the benefits from this. We're giving to our clients, our producers that have been in another way being damaged with the rust, have access to to keep on, had access to finance to keep on their production, the production system, and we have the repayment as that we told you as collateral for confirming our repayment. So this is one of the greatest benefits of this program, loan program.
Okay, thank you, Juan Carlos. When I'm listening to you and Antonio describe the program, it really seems that also InCafe is very much your partner in this as well.
Yes.
And that a lot of the activities and the product that you put together, it very much rests on the foundation of the relationship that InCafe has with the coffee growers and the strength that InCafe has in terms of having already collected funds and as well as information on the farmers. But okay, yeah, go ahead.
We would definitely wouldn't have been able to do this without ICAFE. The technician, the part by the technicians was completely necessary, and it would have been too expensive to manage these small loans if it weren't for something that ICAFE was able to aid in that sense. So it was definitely something that had to be worked up between both banks because we didn't have, and the ICAFE's participation as well.
Okay, thanks. So we have some other questions coming in, so maybe we can just take them one at a time. There was I think, a good question that came from Safie Ozagun about the foreign exchange risk. Since coffee sales are in U.S. dollars, what's the approach to the management of foreign exchange risk?
Okay, in this case, and we normally don't lend to people that aren't exporters and that don't generate U.S. dollars. Because of that risk, we normally don't give any loans out to them. But since coffee is a commodity and their price is based in U.S. dollars, there was no risk in that sense, and we were able to lend in dollars because of that, and the interest rate was lower because of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the foreign exchange portion also, ironically, even allows you to lower the risk to a certain degree. That's interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got another question in from Habib Shah regarding the average loan size in U.S. dollar terms.
For Bancafe, the average loan size right now is about $4,000 for a producer.
Okay. Is it about the same for Banco Continental?
It's about the same.
Okay.
It's about the same.
Mm-hmm. And then our own Maria Pagura asks, again, getting back to the role of InCafe, which is critical, I think, how does InCafe feed information for their follow-up visits with farmers back to the bank? So they're actually doing these regular checks of the farmers. How do you get into that information loop on how the farmers are doing with InCafe?
The document that they work up, that the ICAFE technicians work up, it's something really simple, and it's just one piece of paper, and what it says is how the farmer has progressed, and it's a format that is already that you just have to fill out, and so it's not that much of work for the technicians. The other thing that I think I forgot to mention is that the loans are approved at each office. And it doesn't have to come to the main branch, to the main bank. They can, between each of the small agencies we have in the towns, they can approve the loan directly. They can, they have their own credit committee, and they can disburse the loan directly at each point. Mm-hmm. And so it's something fairly simple. That's why I tried to imply a lot that it looks a little bit more complicated on paper, but each agency is like their own bank in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to exercise my prerogative as the facilitator. I just had one other question, and then we'll go through. Actually, we have quite a few questions coming through now. But I was just wondering how between Banco Continental and Bancafe, how do you divide the market, or how does someone decide if the terms and conditions of the loans are similar or identical across the banks? Like, how do you decide how to manage the market or divide the market? Go ahead.
Okay. They are exactly the same, and listings were provided to both banks by the very same way. And what we did is we gave the farmer they would be able to go to any of the banks indistinctly. There was no difference, and it was just more of a thing as where they had a closer branch, and the conditions were identical. We came up with the conditions, worked up between both banks, and then ICAFE also negotiated for the interest rate part.
Okay, all right, that seems sensible. Now, I've got several questions here, so let's go through them maybe one by one. Zerihun Kilore asks, how could this be scaled up, this kind of program, and extended to other countries, especially developing countries where financial inclusion is very minimal and financial literacy is critically low? Any thoughts? That's a big question, Zerihun. Yes.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how you would be able to do it in other countries, because definitely the conditions are completely different everywhere. But what this program did confirm is that if you work something between the association and the banks in conjunction, that you are able to find a solution that is to each one. There is no, if you see the loan sizes for us, it's between $750 and $7,500. These are farmers that they work the land themselves. There is no more financially illiterate than the ones we were tending, and the project, its delinquency rate is fairly low. We haven't had that many problems in the recovery, and it has worked because of the agreement that we made between both banks and the ICAFE.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you make a good point, Antonio. And I think the role of ICAFE is critical in providing the information on the farmers. So they're actually collecting not just like credit history, but the history of production and things like that. So you're actually able to make a good judgment about those borrowers. So I think that one way to bring some kind of model like this to scale is to look at the role of those kinds of farmer organizations and support organizations, which are unfortunately lacking in many developing countries. And I think Honduras is blessed and lucky, or maybe not lucky, but wise to have developed ICAFE. All right, let's move on to the next question. Rabin Das asks, Antonio said the disbursement takes 30 days once the loan is approved. My question is, why does it take so long?
Okay, well, part of it was I was explaining that it normally didn't take that long. It was about 7 days. We have to remember that the coffee sectors in the country, they are very concentrated within certain areas. And so we have, for example, a part of the country which is Comayagua, and there's a lot of coffee growers there. And so what happened was that we would get in one agency, which is a very small unit with 3 or 4 employees, and we would get 200 applications at once. So that would make it take a little bit longer. As I said, once the credit was approved, it was pretty quick, and the disbursement was within a couple of days the most.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Gibson Barghese asked another sort of important kind of nuts and bolts question. What would be the procedure if the loans are not paid back in time? Now, we know that the repayment rate is very high, but in those cases where there is problems with loan repayment, what do you do?
definitely we have the withholding, the $9 per quintal that Cafe
right.
holds. That will allow us even to pay at least the interest, so we can refinance coffee grower, the producer. At least the interest. In some cases, it is enough to pay the loan, the installments.
Right. So then the first step in the procedure is really to go to eCafe and say, look, we're having some payment problems here, and then you've already got the mechanism in place where you can recover directly from eCafe. You don't actually have to go after the farmer.
No.
Does eCafe is responsible for going after the farmer ultimately, or?
No, we have both. But the bank and eCafe has the obligation to go, the responsibility to go after the farmer and ask for the payment. Sorry, Antonio, go ahead.
No, sorry. The advantage in this case is remember that in many cases, someone from the bank, in all cases, someone from the bank attended the customer or the client when they got to the branch. And so in most cases, there is some sort of relation, even if it's a small client and a small producer, there is some relation between the bank and the customer. And in many cases, since it is in small towns, the bank knows the customer to a certain point. And
okay,
so the recovery of the loans was something eCafe has certain responsibilities, but it's not delegated completely to them.
Okay, so that's good. So you are also actively engaging with the farmer to letting them know that they have an obligation to repay the bank directly.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, we've got another question coming in from Zerihun, kind of a follow-up. She's mentioning that it would seem that this would require the financial sector to be more or less more developed than other financial sectors may be. And then she's asking a question related to crop insurance. Is there any involvement of crop insurance in this model?
No, we didn't have any crop insurance. Most of these, as we said, the farmers that have insurance for their crops here in Honduras are the larger part of the farmers. They are the biggest farmers. These small farmers don't have the availability of insurance.
Right, that's right. Yeah. But what they do have is the support of eCafe in the form of a kind of a guarantee on that repayment.
Yes.
Okay, there's a question again from Safia asking, does eCafe guarantee all loans with the trust fund that they have under this program?
No, not all guarantee the trust fund. No. We only have the guarantee that withholdings that withholding of the coffee product growers that have loans with us. In this case, we have in order to approve a loan to this farmer, we check how was the harvest levels that historically has been reported to eCafe. And over these historic levels that they have, we have a haircut for them in order to determine the size of the loan that we will give to them. Mm-hmm. So only for this loan program, we have the trust, the withholdings, not the trust fund, the withholdings as a repayment for the loans.
Okay. All right. So it's not the trust fund itself. It's It's the amount of money that is withheld by eCafe related to those specific farmers, not the entire trust fund.
Not the entire trust fund. That's right.
Okay. So another question about eCafe coming in from Helene Roy. How does eCafe ensure that the renovation and rehabilitation practices on the farm are implemented accordingly so that farmers can reimburse loans through delivers of coffee afterwards. Yeah, okay, so how does eCafe ensure coffee delivery from farmers who receive financing?
The eCafe technicians periodically visits to these coffee growers, and because there are multiple disbursements, we don't give them the second disbursement until we have the confirmation and the visit from the eCafe technician.
Okay. All right, so they're actively checking. Yeah.
Yes, and they don't exclusively visit for this purpose, but technicians give technical assistance to all growers for fertilization reasons and everything. So what they do is that they appreciate a visit to do everything.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me just ask you this. I mean, related to that, are there cases where eCafe goes out and finds that the farmer hasn't fertilized, hasn't planted the new plants, or does that just not happen very, very often?
We have had and we haven't had any cases whatsoever between the 2000s. There's a close-knit relationship between eCafe and their farmers, and so most of these that are, and it's controlled by the partial disbursements, and so it has not happened. We have had cases, and there is a delinquency rate. It's not that high. But what has happened maybe is that their production went down significantly, or maybe they were selling outside of, and so their withholdings weren't enough for them to cover the loan. But as Juan Carlos said, in all cases, at least the interests are covered.
Yes. Okay. All right. That's good. We have a question from Viviana Romero. What are the prerequisites to get loans for coffee growers? Are those prerequisites the same as other loans granted by the banks? And I'm sorry if I'm not asking that correctly, but yeah.
Okay. No, the prerequisites are a lot less than in other applications. And the major reason is because, as we said before, these are people that are not used to working with banks, much less applicating for a loan in a bank. And so we go a lot with La Ficha Técnica, which is the little paper I was telling you that is filled out by the technician, and then their ID practically, and between the eCafe, the other one, and our everything else is done in-house.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And a lot of good questions coming in now. So from Manel Modelo, asks, why is the grace period 36 months on the renovation product if the new plants will start to produce only in the fourth year?
The withholdings are annual, and so if you see it's the 36 month grace period, and then because of the payment plan, it would be in the 48th month that they would have to pay.
Okay, gotcha.
The
and
plan,
then,
okay.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. No. Go ahead.
Another question from Miguel Jongeward. I'm curious about the interest rates and the profitability of the program.
Okay. The interest rates, we lend at 9% in dollars, which is very high compared to the U.S., but it is very, very low if we compare to this type of product here in Honduras. And definitely it is not the most profitable product that we have. However, we are able to start a relationship with farmers that maybe wouldn't have been our clients. And since Honduras depends a lot on coffee, we are not looking at the profitability of these small loans itself, but what we're looking at is the potential of making them our customers and other coffee growers seeing that we are attending the sector. We also had the responsibility of doing it because 8.5% of Honduras's gross domestic product depends on this. If the economy in Honduras is bad, we won't have any customers to be able to do business with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And believe me, we need your coffee. Okay, I can assure you. Okay, question from Marco. How do farmers? I think we may have covered this, but I'm gonna maybe you can go ahead and clarify. How do farmers choose between Bancafe and Banco Continental? Is it pricing, location, of branches, etc.?
The pricing is the same, so okay. I would have to say in some cases the farmers already have a close-knit relation to one of the banks because they tend them. In the cases that they don't have a relation to any of the banks, I would think it would be branches. Right.
Okay. All right. Sensible. Yeah. And then a question from Luz Diaz Rios, and I'm suspecting she is an agronomist. Where are the planting materials for replanting the coffee trees produced? Are there any specific requirements in relation to the type of varieties to be planted, i.e. rust resistant, in order to benefit from the loan?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Right now, almost every coffee producer that is investing in rust resistant varieties like Cafe 90, like Lentira. There are much less they're not. The taste of the coffee is not as good as other varieties, but it's much more resistant to rust. These varieties, and yes, everyone is investing in Cafe 90 in Lentira.
So it isn't that the farmers are just going out and finding whatever coffee plant they can. It's more structured program of replacement with resistant varieties.
Resistant varieties, yes.
Yeah. And does eCafe play a role in that also in terms of organizing the delivery of the proper rust resistant plants?
They continually give information and they educate the producers and the technicians. One of the roles is that to educate the producer and tell them why it's more important to use this kind of varieties.
Right.
How more profitable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But eCafe itself is not in the business.
The other ones, but
okay.
Much more resistant.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry for interrupting, Juan Carlos. But just one question, is eCafe involved? They're not involved in the sale of actual coffee plants. The farmers have to get their plants from other providers. Is that the situation?
Yes. The coffee producers sell them to intermediate. This one
okay.
sells to the exporter that where it ends the supply chain.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. So again, there's another question from Rahul Bhargava related to crop insurance. Is there crop meso or bank level crop insurance? Are growers' loans automatically crop insured against, for instance, weather or disease? Is this an option in Honduras?
We do have we do have crop insurance, but as I said, crop insurance is pretty expensive here in Honduras, and very few farmers actually insure their crop. And normally, the ones that assure their crop are the larger of the farmers. Very few do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So from Nomatemba Blanga, any thoughts from the speakers on the applicability or relevance of this business model for other crops or commodities in Honduras? You see any other opportunities to cooperate in this way, or is this unique?
I would say that with this specific model, this is unique because the Coffee Growers Association is one of the ones that is the most organized in that sense. They are very unified, well organized. They have very good leadership within the association, and so I would think that it would be more of a challenge in any other case. And as Juan Carlos mentioned, one of the things that allowed us to do this is that we have managed a relation with them for the last maybe 10 years managing the trust fund.
Yes. Okay. So there's trust and a long working relationship between the banks and eCafe on the one hand, and there's also a long relationship between eCafe and the farmers.
Yes.
So it is quite a unique, almost a triangular type relationship. Actually, we have a couple questions that have come in about eCafe. How do they pay for the technical assistance that they provide to the farmers? Okay, so Elisa Gertner asks, how does eCafe pay for the technical assistance, reporting, and loan monitoring that is provided? Does this come from association fees? Do they receive a percentage of the interest rate payment?
No, on the part of the interest rate payment, but they do receive their technicians aren't there for this specific product, as I said before. Their technicians are there to provide assistance to the farmers, and I do think that they have association fees. I know that they have them. I'm just not sure what they are or how they pay them.
Okay.
And
so eCafe has a... Go ahead, Juan Carlos. Yeah.
They also sells fertilizers to the coffee producers, so they have any income from that activity too.
Okay, so eCafe has its cost recovery, techniques and models. Okay, all right, interesting. So Luz Diaz asks, again, what is the average cost of replanting a hectare, for instance, replacing with new plants? Any ideas?
And
bit of a
about 5 manzanas, it will be like, let me see. It will be like 3.5 hectares per coffee grower. Average.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm sorry. How much does it cost? Can you do it on a hectare basis, or?
Sorry? The cost?
Okay. The cost per hectare of replanting.
The cost per hectare would be like, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I haven't heard. I can't actually hear now. I'm sorry. I wasn't able to hear the response there, but
$1,000, correct.
Okay, roughly $1,000. Okay. Sorry for the dead air there for a second. Yeah. Okay. There was another question from Elisa regarding the average cost. Okay, so we talked about the average cost of replanting. From the size of the loans farmers take, are they sufficient for them to be commercially viable? At the moment, for some coffee, I'm trying to figure out what was determining loan size based on future potential viability. Okay, so I guess the question is related to the sort of average size of the coffee farms, and at what level is that coffee farm commercially, profitable or viable?
They're commercially viable from the smallest to the largest when the coffee price is right. As I said before, in most of the cases, they are farmed by the farmers are the ones doing the work themselves when they're the smallest ones, which is the case in most of these customers.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
for
interesting.
their family members and itself.
Okay. So even a very small farm, and is it also true that these farmers have income from other kinds of crops or other activities as well?
In most cases, yes.
Okay. All right. Elisa asks. Elisa's firing questions away here, right? But she has an interesting one with relation to the use of. Are you using like mobile phones or any sort of mobile banking type mechanisms for either the disbursement of payments or repayments, and or are you looking for opportunities to open savings accounts for the farmers that you're banking?
With the part of the savings account, it is a requisite for the loan, and that's why I was saying that part of the business is where we see that there's lots of potential on the collateral business, on the business that comes with it, not so much on the loans themselves. As for the technical part, our bank, specifically Continental, has been working on some sort of technical using a mobile phone for banking. However, this is not the segment itself that it's being oriented to. In most cases, these people are a little bit they have sort of a shield against certain technology, and they much rather have a paper and a relation with a specific person at an office or something like that.
So they really trust like a formal receipt.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we'll take one more question and then we're gonna have to wrap it up. But and I thank you everyone for their questions. Reiner Fitz asks, are the farmers sticking to the contract to deliver coffee to eCafe, or is there side selling of coffee to other buyers?
There is always a side selling within a few of the farmers. We detect this quite often. However, it tends not to happen for very long because it is much easier, and normally you get better prices when you sell through eCafe.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. So I see many questions still coming in, but unfortunately we're out of time. I want to take this opportunity to thank Antonio Coelho, Regional Vice President of Banco Continental. Thank you very much for a very stimulating and provocative presentation. And also to Juan Carlos Barahona Lara, Regional Manager at Bancafe. Fantastic presentation, gentlemen. We really appreciated it. And to all the questioners, thank you so much. I know that we didn't get to everyone's questions, and I know Marco Centro is going to be upset with me because he has several that he's fired up in the last few minutes. But Marco and others, if you would like, we are going to reprise or repeat this presentation later today in Spanish. So hopefully your Spanish will allow you to, and you can ask your questions in Spanish. That would be good, yeah. But thank you very much to everyone, yeah. And then, but before ending today's webinar, I want to remind everyone at the close of the webinar, after we've signed off, you will see on your screen a brief survey, which we ask you to fill out. It will take less than 30 seconds, and we need your feedback. It helps us in the programming of future webinars, and we want to know what you think about the presentation today, of course. So if you have any further questions, you can email us directly. You can send an email to agrifene@worldbank.org. But I would just like to say, on behalf of all of the Agrifene team here in Washington, I'd like to thank Antonio and Juan Carlos for contributing to the knowledge exchange in this webinar today. The lessons garnered from this webinar will help shape the way that other professionals may approach the financing of the coffee value chain. And I think that they've helped us understand the importance of farmer associations, if nothing else. So thank you very much to our presenters and to everyone around the world for taking the time to share your busy schedules with us today. On behalf of Agrifin, then, Antonio and Juan Carlos, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
And we will talk to you again later today for the Spanish version, which will be our first, in fact, Spanish version of the webinar.
Excellent.
Okay, very good. Thank you to all.
Thank you again.
All righty.